Hey guys, Miss Hanna here. Well, the library was right. I'm not feeling so good today, so today's story time's gonna be a little bit short. But today's story time is also a special story time. I'm dedicating it to my grandma. She's had kind of a rough week this week. You know, all of us have a rough week. So I'm reading 2 books that I know that she really likes. And I hope that she'll watch and listen to these 2 books too. So the first book I'm going to start out with is one that you guys may or may not have heard before. Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day by Judith Bjorst, illustrated by Ray Cruz. Ready? Here we go. Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. Here we go. I went to sleep with gum in my mouth, and now there's gum in my hair. And when I got out of bed this morning, I tripped on the skateboard, and by mistake I dropped my sweater in the sink while water was running, and I could tell it was going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. At breakfast, Anthony found a Corvette Stingray car kit in his breakfast cereal box. And Nick found a junior undercover agent code ring in his breakfast cereal box. But in my breakfast cereal box, all I found was breakfast cereal. Oh, I think I'll move to Australia. So, in the carpool, Miss Gibson let Becky have a seat by the window. Audrey and Elliot got seats by the window, too. I said I was being scrunched. I said I was being smushed. I said if I don't get a seat by the window, I am going to be car sick. No one even answered. I could tell it was going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. At school, Miss Dickens liked Paul's picture of the sailboat better than my picture of the invisible castle. Well, at singing time, she said I sang too loud. At counting time, she said I left out 16. Who needs 16? I could tell it was going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. I could tell because Paul said I wasn't his best friend anymore. He said Philip Parker was his best friend, and that Albert Moyo was his next best friend, and that I was only his 3rd best friend. I hope you sit on a tack, I said to Paul. I hope the next time you get a double-decker strawberry ice cream cone, the ice cream part falls off the cone part and lands in Australia. There were 2 cupcakes in Philip Parker's lunch bag, and Albert got a Hershey bar with almonds. And Paul's mother gave him a piece of a jelly roll that had little coconut sprinkles on the top. Guess whose mother forgot to put in dessert? It was a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. Well, that's what it was. Because after school, my mom took us all to the dentist, and Dr. Fields found a cavity just in me. Come back next week and I'll fix it, said Dr. Fields. Next week, I said, I'm going to Australia. On the way downstairs, the elevator door closed on my foot, and while we were waiting for my mom to go get the car, Anthony made me fall where it was muddy. And then when I started crying because of the mud, Nick said I was a crybaby. And while I was punching Nick for saying crybaby, my mom came back with the car and scolded me for being muddy and fighting. Ugh. I am having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, I told everybody. No one even answered. So then we went to the shoe store to buy some sneakers. Anthony chose white ones with blue stripes. Nick chose red ones with white stripes. And I chose blue ones with red stripes. But then the shoe man said, "We're all sold out. They made me buy plain old white ones, but they can't make me wear them." When we picked up my dad at his office, he said I couldn't play with his copying machine, but I forgot. He also said to watch out for the books on his desk, and I was careful as could be, except for my elbow. He also said don't fool around with his phone, but I think I called Australia. My dad said please don't pick him up anymore. It was a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. There were lima beans for dinner, and I hate limas. There was kissing on TV, and I hate kissing. Blah. My bath was too hot. I got soap in my eyes. My marble went down the drain, and I had to wear my railroad train pajamas. I hate my railroad train pajamas. When I went to bed, Nick took back the pillow he said I could keep, and the Mickey Mouse nightlight burned out, and I bit my tongue. The cat wants to sleep with Anthony, not me. It has been a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. My mom says some days are like that. Even in Australia. The end. Now, for my next book, and this is a book that I was read when I was little by my grandmother. It's called Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey. It's a big book, so I'm going to try my best to show the pictures in this one as best as I can. Okay. All right. Had to do my best. Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey. Make way for ducklings. Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live, but every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. There were sure to be foxes in the woods or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles. So they flew on and on. Now, when they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any further. There was a nice pond in the public garden with a little island on it. The very place to spend the night, quacked Mr. Mallard. So down they flapped. That's my imitation of wings. Next morning, they fished for breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond, but they didn't find much. Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting on its back. "Good morning," quacked Mr. Mallard, being polite. The big bird was too proud to answer, but the people on the boat threw peanuts in the water, so the Mallards followed them all around the pond and got another breakfast better than the first. "I like this place," said Mrs. Mallard as they climbed out on the bank and waddled along. "Why don't we build a nest and raise our ducklings right in this pond? There are no foxes and no turtles, and the people feed us peanuts. What could be better?" "Good," said Mr. Mallard, delighted that at last Miss Mallard had found a place that suited her. "But..." "Look out!" squawked Mrs. Mallard, all of a dither. "You'll get run over!" And when she got her breath, she added, "This is no place for babies, with all those horrid things rushing about. We'll have to look somewhere else." So they flew all over Beacon Hill and round the State House, but there was no place there. They looked in Louisburg Square, but there was no water to swim in. Then they flew over the Charles River. "This is better," quacked Mr. Mallard. "That island looks like a nice quiet place, and it's only a little way from the public garden." "Yes," said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts. "That looks like just the right place to hatch ducklings." Let's see. So they chose a cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest. And only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt. All their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones grew in. But of course, they could swim, and one day they swam over to the park on the riverbank, and there they met a policeman called Michael. Michael fed them peanuts, and after that, the Mallards called on Michael every day. After Mrs. Mallard had laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't go to visit Michael anymore because she had to sit on the eggs to keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water or to have her lunch or to count the eggs and make sure they were all there. One day, the ducklings hatched out. First came Jack, then Cack, then Lack, then Mack, then Knack, then out Whack, and then Pack and Quack. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were bursting with pride. It was great responsibility taking care of so many ducklings, and it kept them very busy. One day, Mr. Mallard decided he'd like to take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like further on. So off he set. "I'll meet you in a week in the public garden," he quacked over his shoulder. "Take good care of the ducklings." "Don't you worry," said Mrs. Mallard. "I know all about bringing up children." And she did. She taught them how to swim and dive. She taught them to walk in a line, to come when they were called, and to keep a safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels. When she at last felt perfectly satisfied with them, she said one morning, "Come along, children, follow me." Before you could wink an eyelash, Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack fell into line just as they had been taught. And Mrs. Mallard led the way into the water, and they swam behind her to the opposite bank. There we go. So you can see a little bit better. There they waded ashore and waddled along till they came to the highway. Uh-oh. They're going to the highway. Mrs. Mallard stepped out to cross the road. "Honk!" with the horns on the speeding cars. "Ow, whack!" went Miss Mallard as she tumbled back again. "Whack, whack, whack, whack!" went Jack, Cack, Lack, Whack, Whack, Pack, and Quack, just as loud as their little quackers could quack. The cars kept speeding by and honking, and Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings kept right on quack-quacking. They made such a noise that Michael came running, waving his arms and blowing his whistle. "Tweet, tweet, tweet, tweet." He planted himself in the center of the road, raised one hand to stop the traffic, and then beckoned with the other, the way policemen do, for Miss Mallard to cross over. And look at her little face, look. Can you see? Look at that little face. She's so proud. As soon as Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings were safe on the other side and on their way down Mount Vernon Street, Michael rushed back to his police booth. He called Clancy at headquarters and said, "There's a family of ducks walking down the street." Clancy said, "Family of what?" "Ducks!" yelled Michael. "Send a police car, quick!" Meanwhile, Mrs. Mallard had reached the corner book shop and had turned into Charles Street with Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack, all marching in line behind her. There they are. Everyone stared. An old lady from Beacon Hill said, "Isn't it amazing?" And the man who swept the streets said, "Well, now, ain't that nice?" And when Mrs. Mallard heard them, she was so proud she tipped her nose in the air and walked along with an extra swing in her waddle. When they came to the corner of Beacon Street, there was the police car with 4 policemen that Clancy had sent from headquarters. The policemen held back the traffic so Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings could march across the street. Right on into the public garden. Inside the gate, they all turned around to say thank you to the policeman. The policeman smiled and waved goodbye, goodbye. When they reached the pond and swam across to the little island, there was Mr. Mallard waiting for them just as he had promised. The ducklings liked the new island so much that they decided to live there. All day long they follow the swan boats and eat peanuts. And when night falls, they swim to their little island and go to sleep. The end of Make Way for Ducklings. And that's all I have for you tonight, guys. I want to thank you for tuning in to watch with me. And I'm sorry I can't stay with you a little bit longer tonight, but we'll have more time on Thursday, okay? So I look forward to seeing you then, and don't forget, make sure you brush your teeth before you go to bed tonight and snuggle in tight. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.